just like you would maintain a car. I mean, you change your oil in your car, I hope. So it's kind of thing with HVAC units as well. You can't just expect zero maintenance over 20 years. And I think that is the best way to prevent issues with HVAC.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast, a regular discussion with building industry professionals. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Engineer and Senior Product Marketing Manager with Allied Air Enterprises, Cameron Prince. You can find the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast and the original Fine Homebuilding podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can ask questions and leave feedback there too. Cameron, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Patrick. Very excited for this today.
You told me this is your first podcast. What do you think so far?
Yeah, this is definitely a learning experience for me, but I'm once again very excited to be here, so ready to get rolling.
We met because you were kind enough to help me with my variable capacity heat pump and air conditioning story. Can you please tell me what you do at Allied Air Enterprises and where you're located and what kind of equipment y'all make and how many people work there?
Yes, so I think this has always been my struggle, and every time I've ever tried to describe a job that I do, it's the most, difficult question to answer because I know my job well, but explaining it to people that don't know my job, it might be a little difficult to do. So bear with me here. I'm going to describe, as you said, the product marketing manager for residential air conditioners, coils, air handlers, and heat pumps with Allied. That's kind of a mouthful. But basically split cooling products is a good summary for that. So the product management team at Allied is structured a little bit different than other companies. I've heard it referred to as portfolio managers in the past. But basically how the product management team is split up is we have product managers that deal with the technical side of the house. So everything before the launch of the product with engineering and making sure we're meeting specifications and things like that up into the manufacturing launch. And then the product marketing manager, which is my role, kind of takes it from there. And then we're with the product until the product retires. And it's really important for me in my role to keep a good pulse of the market and the industry and what's going on. Voice of customer is something that, we talk about every day in my role and how important that is to make sure that we're ahead of customer needs and innovation. So, all in all, it's a really exciting job. It's I really enjoy the HVAC industry, and being able to support it throughout product inception to product retirement has been really enjoyable.
So are you talking to the end users, the HVAC installers and customers who have your equipment in their house about how it's going? My presumption is that you hear about problems as well as successes. Is that true? Absolutely.
And I think people are very interested in telling you the problems that they have more than the solution, like the good things, the wins. But the way that Allied is structured is a little different. It's called a two-step distribution program. So we're selling to distributors who are then selling to the dealers who are selling to the end user. So we have a lot of different, players in the game that we have to think about. And I'm definitely dealing with the customers, which our direct customer is a distributor. But of course, that all plays down the line to the end user.
Yeah, because they hear from their customers who in turn,
Absolutely.
So where are you located and how many folks work for this company?
So I am personally located in West Columbia, South Carolina. Allied Air our parent company is Lennox International, which is a well-known HVAC company. So Lennox itself is a large company. Allied employs about 800 people in West Columbia, South Carolina, where our corporate office is for Allied. And then we have an Orangeburg, South Carolina plant as well. So across those two locations, we have about 800 employees. LII as a whole has manufacturing plants across North America. So 5 different manufacturing plants in the area or across North America that we all work with. So not just the South Carolina locations.
Are the Allied products made in South Carolina largely? I'm assuming the components come from all over, but they're put together there?
Absolutely, yeah. And we get support from other manufacturing plants, that LII owns as well. But we do make a lot of our products in Orangeburg, South Carolina.
That's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And what are the brands that the listeners might have heard of that this equipment is associated with?
Yeah, so there's a few brands. Whenever you talk about Allied, one of them is right over my shoulder. Duquesne is one of them, and Concord. Those are considered our over-the-counter brands. And then we have flagship brands that are Armstrong Air and Air Ease. And those are all, fall under the Allied branding. And those are all of our residential brands. We also have an Allied residential brand as well. But Allied also has a commercial portfolio, and it's usually branded under the Allied commercial brand. We also have something called Magic Pack, which is a multifamily all-in-one package solution that, your listeners might have heard of before as well.
You'll have to explain that to me. This is, what does all-in-one package mean?
So, when you look at a rooftop of a commercial building, in a multifamily, you kind of want to zone for particular, rooms. Think of an apartment or something like that. So Magic Pack can support those needs with an all-in-one system.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Before you started working at Allied, you worked for other HVAC equipment companies. Can you please tell me what your roles were at those companies?
Yeah.
My assumption is that you have a mechanical engineering degree. Is that right?
Yes, that is right. I do have a mechanical engineering degree from the University of South Carolina. I usually would refer to it as USC, but that means something completely different to anyone that lives outside of South Carolina. I've learned that over my years. So the University of South Carolina is where I got my mechanical engineering degree about 10 years ago now. But yes, you're right. I have worked for other HVAC OEMs in the past. Trane Technologies is where I got my start. I was actually there whenever they transitioned from Ingersoll Rand to Trane Technologies, which is an interesting time to be there. But it's where I got my start. I was kind of sent to an HVAC boot camp. They have this very intense, I would say, sales training in La Crosse, Wisconsin, where they talk about the fundamentals of HVAC. So I learned a lot about that. Of course, my mechanical engineering background helps support. We have heat transfer and things like that to think about in that, curriculum.
Can I guess you didn't study HVAC specifically? Is that correct?
Right. Correct. Just broad-based mechanical engineering. I actually started as a chemical engineering major and quickly changed because that was not my calling. But mechanical engineering, but heat transfer, of course, goes into everything that we think about in HVAC, and that's, of course, included in a mechanical engineering curriculum. But like I said, got a lot of, my start at Trane Technologies, and it's really served me well in my role here at Allied. And just, really excited to continue to grow my experience with the end user customer facing. When I was at Trane, I was what they refer to as a marketing engineer, but some refer to as a product support engineer. I was on the pre-sale side of the business. So that means that I was talking to the sales engineers from all over North America and in Canada about how to kind of close deals and the best way
so they tell you what their customers want or need, and then your job is to figure out a way to do it. Is that a fair way to describe it?
Yeah, especially with what can we do, right? Like, we don't, at that time at Trane, where, of course, anytime we have any product, we're constrained to a certain degree. So how can we help provide a solution for our customers based on what we have?
At the minimum, there's always, you say there's a constraint. It could be money, right? You just can't charge too much for something, I'm guessing. Is that correct?
Yeah, money is also a factor anytime we're talking about this. But one thing in particular, when I was at Trane, I was on the commercial side. That's where I got my start. So we talk about a two-step distribution on the residential side with Allied, but on the commercial side, we were dealing with the building owners and the engineers that are designing the equipment. So definitely had to know the business, on all sides there as well.
Did you have people growing up that encouraged you to become an engineer? Did you always like math and problem solving and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I have always taken a big interest in math and sciences. I don't know if you've ever seen the memes where people are talking about their dads yelling at them about math homework. That was certainly my experience, where my dad sat at the kitchen table many times, trying to explain how to do algebra to me. So I think that really served me well in my engineering.
Is he an engineer?
He is not. And that is kind of one of my points, is that I would certainly describe him as an engineering mindset, someone that has an engineering mindset, but does not have an engineering degree.
I'm sure there are all kinds of engineers, but generally, do you think that engineers feel like there's an engineering solution to every problem? And do you think that's true?
Yeah. So I'm actually married to an engineer. We met in college, so that's interesting. We're very different engineers as well. He's very, very technical, loves to work on his car and things like that. But I think the thing that I've found that it's kind of a broad statement, but to say about engineers is that have you ever gotten a product that you said, why did they design it like this? Why did they do this?
Most of the time, Cameron.
Right. And so that's what being an engineer is like. You get a product and then you say, well, why do they do this? And then you find different ways to solve a problem that, isn't really even your problem to solve. But I think that that's part of being an engineer, is trying to continuously improve designs and, constantly always try to find a problem with designs. And I think a really important piece of engineering is that technology is always changing and improving. And if we're not talking to one another and collaborating across businesses, across, our engineering colleagues, or just sales and marketing and things like that, then I don't think we'll be as successful as if we do all of those things.
Do you think that, engineers have a reputation oftentimes as being very much in their own head and less about interpersonal relationships or group dynamics and that stuff? Do you think that's part of this equation? Is it because you're always thinking about a better way to do stuff that it's tough to collaborate maybe sometimes?
Yeah, and I think engineers get a little bit of a bad rap with that. I know I've heard a lot of people be like, oh, well, engineers just like to have their head on the desk and not really interact with the outside world. Of course, as you know, I'm a mechanical engineer as well, and I still like to talk to people. So,
yeah.
It's just, and my husband's the same way. If you get us together, we'll be talking all over each other. But it's just, it takes all different types of engineers to make the world go round. I definitely think that there are lots of engineers that would prefer to, work and not really be bothered with, the social part of work and things like that.
Social dynamics, yeah.
Yeah. So,
do you guys fight about engineering problems?
Oh,
or
yeah.
Not
we
fight,
always think we're right. Yeah. But I think that it is really interesting. And not just, my husband. We have lots of engineering colleagues that we talk about. And it sounds like a boring Friday night, but we do enjoy sitting there talking about like what could be better with, the things around our house. We bought a house 3 years ago, and we're constantly doing little when I say little, I mean more than little DIY projects around the house. And we're always talking about the best way to do those things as well.
We'll talk about more about that later. I love that part of the show.
Yeah.
When you go to commercial or institutional spaces and even other people's homes, do you find yourself looking at the heating and cooling equipment, the ducts and registers? Because this is something the carpenters do, right? I go to the restaurant and I have to look around and see what the quality of the trim installation is.
Yeah, absolutely. So in commercial spaces in particular, duct design has become an architectural thing in buildings. You have lots of different buildings that have exposed duct these days that might not have been the same way lots and lots of years ago. And we certainly get a little bit more access to looking at duct design in a commercial space versus residential. You're not going to go in someone's attic and look around at their duct.
Oh, I would. Don't doubt it.
But yeah, certainly. I mean, that is, I think whenever you're passionate about what you're doing, which I am passionate about HVAC, you enjoy seeing what other people are doing. I'm constantly looking at rooftops, and, even when I go to my friends and family's homes, I'm looking at their units. I'm like walking around to the side of their house saying, oh, you've got a packaged unit, or oh, you've got a heat pump, and I think it's something, especially in the residential, just to flip the switch a little bit, to talk about residential, it is, you don't really realize how important your HVAC unit is until you have an emergency, like it goes out, especially in South Carolina. If we're hot, humid climate, and if our HVAC goes out in the summer, it's trouble.
Dangerous.
Right. And lots of other parts of the world. And then, of course, the flip side of, being in the northern climates when it gets really, really cold in the wintertime. I mean, it is also dangerous to not have a good HVAC system.
Yeah, people just expect it to work, right? And it's totally out of mind until something goes wrong. Right.
Absolutely.
What do you see when you either in commercial spaces or residential spaces that you as an engineer or know as a product manager that drives you crazy? Like, do you see bad installs? Do you see thermostat placements in a bad spot? That kind of stuff?
Yeah. So I'll talk about commercial first. So whenever I look into the ceiling and see the duct, and then I see a light in the middle of where the duct is, and then there was a duct transition around that light or something like that, those are the kind of things that bother me, because duct transition, you want to minimize that as much as you can, of course. And that just kind of has to do with the nature of a new construction job site. There's lots of people on the job site, and there's lots of moving parts and things like that. In residential spaces, I'm very passionate about filters. I personally suffer from really bad allergies, and so I certainly subscribe to the idea that it's really important to have a filter that can trap as many allergens and dust particles as possible. However, with a, MERV, have you ever heard of a MERV rating, Patrick?
Sure.
Okay, so we know MERV, we know what it stands for, but it's a minimum efficiency reporting value, and it basically just describes how much the filter can trap, or how efficiently the filter can trap the dust particles. And so there's been a huge push for higher MERV ratings, especially in commercial spaces, but it doesn't necessarily translate to residential spaces the same, in my opinion. So, if you want to put a MERV 20 filter on your residential home, you're basically asking your unit to push air through cardboard. It's really, and your unit probably is not designed for that. And there are units out there that can support those kinds of things, but I think it's really important for me to express that you need to be mindful of what kind of unit you have on your home and whether or not your unit can, sustain that kind of MERV rating.
Would it be similar if a filter was super clogged? Is it that
same idea? Yeah.
Degree of restriction, or is it even more?
Yeah, it's the same idea as if it were super clogged. And then basically the way that I combat that, because like I said, I have bad seasonal allergies and blah, blah, blah. The way I combat that is I change my filters more regularly. So I change them every 3 months rather than maybe recommended every 6 months. And, usually your contractor, if you ask your contractor those questions, they can help guide you. But certainly it affects the efficiency and the productivity and the longevity of your unit with filters. So that's something that, we have a lot of control over as homeowners, and maybe people just don't know a whole lot about.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of failures do you see when people put these super high MERV filters in their HVAC systems? Is it blower motors?
Yeah, it's going to affect your motor, certainly. And, of course, without a motor, it doesn't make run
anything.
Right. So, yeah, that's just something to keep into consideration.
To me, it seems like the prospects for the HVAC industry are good for the future. I suspect a warmer climate will mean increased demand for conditioned interiors, which I suspect will be good for equipment manufacturers. Does your company share this optimism?
Yeah, I think, I specifically think about the most recent instance in the Northwest where they had the heat wave, and there's a lot of people in the Northwest. My cousin lives in Portland, Oregon, and they don't even have an air conditioner in their apartment, which to me is just such a foreign concept.
But you grew up in South Carolina.
Right.
Yeah.
So South Carolina is a much different climate than Portland, Oregon. But I think with these kinds of heat waves happening, people are, starting to realize how important HVAC is and things like that. On top of that, COVID-19 pandemic has really changed the industry. We've seen unprecedented demand in the past year because people are at home more. They're starting to think more about how important air quality is, both in residential but especially commercial spaces. And I think we, of course, are optimistic that this will continue. People will continue to realize the importance of HVAC in both their home and in their commercial spaces.
We were talking about variable capacity equipment, which, while not new, it's been around for at least 10 years, the central stuff we're talking about, is going to keep improving the efficiency of both heating and different technology, keep improving the efficiency of cooling equipment, and different technology is going to improve the efficiency of heating equipment. Do you think that's true? Or are we going to keep getting more BTUs out of the energy we're spending on keeping our homes comfortable?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we did get to talk a lot about variable capacity units, and I think that, especially with improvements in compressor technology over the years, this is going to continue to be a trend that we see. It's something that our company has invested in. We just recently launched a variable speed heat pump, which is called the Lynx 18, to support these growing customer needs where we're moving towards higher efficiency with regional standards, which I kind of want to talk to you about later in the podcast. But we see the support from regulations that units need to have higher efficiency, and we will continue to support those needs.
And the 18 refers to the SEER rating, is that correct?
Yes, it does refer to the SEER rating.
And what is the minimum SEER rating presently? And what is it going to be? And is it 2023, I believe it's going to be ramped up?
Right. So for the minimum efficiency, it's different based on where you live. So the United States has been broken up into 3 different regions. There's the northern region, there's the south region, and the southwest region. So it depends on where you live. If you are in the north, the minimum efficiency is 13 SEER. If you're in the south, it's 14 SEER for heat pumps. And it will be going to 1 SEER point above that in 2023.
And do you think most folks will notice a 1 point SEER difference on their utility bill? Like, is that a significant improvement in efficiency?
I wouldn't say 1 SEER point is a very significant, difference.
Bump, yeah.
But you certainly, if you study your electricity bill, if you go higher in efficiency, it will bring your electricity bill down. So, as you continue to improve that, you'll see savings there.
We all keep hearing about the switch to a renewable energy economy and that fossil fuels are on the way out. As an example, car companies are pledging to make the switch to electric vehicles way faster than I could have imagined even 5 years ago. Do you see the same response from the HVAC equipment manufacturers who make gas heating and hot water appliances?
Yeah, so in terms of renewable energy, as you said, we've seen electric cars, but similar to electric cars, the HVAC industry cannot just flip a switch and all of a sudden be all electric. And we haven't seen that in the car industry, and we won't see that in the HVAC industry. We've definitely, as a company, invested in, the importance of decreasing gas emissions with ultra low NOx products on our package units and things such as that. We've seen a movement towards electrification with heat pumps. But there definitely will be a learning experience or a educational phase for our contractors installing this equipment. As we've seen in the northern climates, that's a typical air conditioner with a gas furnace market. And there's just a little different nuances when it comes to little things, educational things to learn about installing a heat pump that are just different than installing an air conditioner. It's not, anything, like you said earlier, rocket science or anything. If you already know how to install an air conditioner, it should be an easy transition. It's just getting people comfortable with something new, because a lot of the people that have been installing air conditioners and gas furnaces have been doing it for quite some time. So it's just the change. And, I wouldn't say that we are experts at all, and it's not something that we are in with the renewable energy industry. But it's something that we're keeping a pulse on, and we'll continue to, provide our customers with what they need.
Do you eventually see heat pumps replacing gas furnaces in northern climates? I mean, that's what I keep hearing.
Yeah, I've definitely seen more excitement from typical, gas furnace customers. I've seen more excitement in heat pump. Of course, like I mentioned with our Lynx 18 launch that we're going through right now, we've had, the first people on the line up for wanting these products are the people that are used to installing gas furnaces. I just don't know a timeline. I think it's more of a 30-year thing than a 5-year thing. It's going to take us some time, and just like I kind of go back to your example on the car industry, it hasn't been a flip switch there either. We still have plenty of cars. I think you'd agree,
though, it's gone faster than I would have guessed. I bet you too, as an engineer, right? It's
certainly.
Before we met, I was unfamiliar with Allied Air Enterprises. Well, I just didn't know the company name, right? So I went to the company website to learn more about it. While checking things out, I found photos of the executive team, and it appears to be a more diverse company than many I've observed. Is that a company ethic, and how did you come to work there?
Yeah, I would say that Allied is the most diverse company that I've personally worked for in my career. I came to work at Allied after a series of fortunate events. I actually saw a LinkedIn posting for a position for a product development engineer, which was kind of in my wheelhouse before. And so I thought it was something that would interest me. I was looking to move to, a different level of position than I was in previously. And so I applied for the job via LinkedIn, and I talked to a recruiter, and I shared my interest and passion into moving into product management. And I guess I should kind of backtrack and say the reason that I have that passion is because I did get an MBA from the University of South Carolina as well. So for me, product management kind of molds, both my technical background, engineering background with my experience in my MBA curriculum as well. The recruiter told me about this product management position that was open at Allied, and it's been, a great experience so far. I really enjoyed working with this team, this diverse team, as you've said. I will say that in terms of our executive team, like I said, most diverse, but that does not mean that we are at gender and diversity parity. And that's something that is really near and dear to my heart, and I know that others on the executive team share the same passion for it. And I think that we will continue to move towards that in the future as well.
You mentioned in our earlier conversation that HVAC engineering is male dominated, which you just alluded to again. It doesn't surprise me. What can these traditionally male dominated industries like construction and engineering do to be more inclusive?
Yeah. So to be more inclusive to like women in the industry. So the first thing that I have to say is I do have to admit, it's not like I went to engineering school with half male and half female students. That's the first thing, is that I know the talent pool is smaller for women engineers versus male engineers. So that is kind of something that has to start a lot younger, I think, with, making it less of a stigma that it's a male dominated industry at the very young years of all of this. But in terms of how, people can support women in the industry, I think mentorship and sponsorship is the most important thing in order to help us grow in the industry. I think whenever people are thinking about choosing a mentee or someone to sponsor, they look at someone who they relate to, someone that they can see themselves 20 years ago, that was me kind of thing, And of course, whenever I'm talking to my male executive counterparts, they're not going to see necessarily me and them, 20 years before. So I think being okay with, sponsoring and mentoring women, because, there's a million studies that can demonstrate how important having a mentor and a sponsor is, especially early on in your career, and how you can be successful through that. The other thing
Did you have that experience? Did you have to make a go of it on your own?
I've had different experiences. I've had experiences where I didn't have that, and I have experience here at Allied where I certainly do have that. I have a very great support system behind me in terms of sponsorship, and not only does it help me, feel like I'm being valued at the company, it helps me kind of, move through my day to day and enjoy coming to work rather than, not enjoying coming to work. The other point that I would like to make about women in the industry is that I think we get labeled as sensitive and hard to work with a lot, especially for doing maybe the same exact thing that our male counterparts would do. I have an example from when I first started working, my third week on my first career job. One of the engineers came back from the manufacturing floor very frustrated and threw his safety glasses across the room and just kind of had a little bit of a temper tantrum. And I just don't think that if I would have, reacted to a situation in the same way, I would have been given the same grace as, oh, well, she's just having a bad day. And so I think that is part of it, is being graceful, realizing that ultimately women are the same, we're human, and just kind of, we have bad days too, kind of thing. So that I will digress, but those are
that's a good point. And the standards are held different for different people often, right? Mm-hmm. So here's the best part of the show. Can you tell me about your own house? Do you have any new or lingering comfort or air quality problems that you're either happily or unhappily ignoring?
Yes. So I will tell you about my house in South Carolina. So think about that climate, very hot,
so you
very
have
humid.
A heat pump, right? You have a central ducted heat pump, right?
I have two split systems. So I have an upstairs and a downstairs. My downstairs unit is original to the home. It is 16 years old, which is getting up there for a system.
I think I told you my uncle was a HVAC contractor, and he would tell you that stuff was better and would last for decades.
Really?
Do you think that's true?
I mean, I think everyone always says that about the past, that it was always better. Of course, we, still a very big pillar of our company is to make good quality longevity products.
Yeah, sure.
But on top of that, my upstairs unit is only 4 years old. So it is not original to the home. Kind of, heat rises type idea applies.
So did you guys add the whole system, the ductwork and everything, or did you replace an air handler that was up in your attic, I'm presuming?
We just replaced the air handler and the outdoor unit. We didn't do any duct replacement or anything like that. But actually, I shouldn't say we. It was our previous owner. We bought the house a year after the new system was put in. But yeah, in terms of lingering comfort issues, I have some. I mainly around, you kind of mentioned earlier in the podcast about temperature sensor and thermostat placement is something that I struggle with a lot. I have a master bedroom with 6 windows, and I have a dog, so I like to shut the door so that he doesn't, get out. And my temperature sensor is not located in my master bedroom. It's located in the outside den of the upstairs, and so I'm constantly too cold or too hot in my master bedroom because of it. So maybe we'll be thinking about some zoning here in the future or something, but certainly.
So are you going to replace the downstairs unit in the near future, or are you going to try and hang on to that as long as you can, like everybody else would?
Yeah, I think it's important. Maintenance, of course, lengthens the life of the unit. Just like anyone else, I want to keep what I've got as long as I can. Yeah. But until I certainly will cross that bridge when I come to it. But I think a really important part, of course, as I mentioned earlier, being in South Carolina and running the risk of my heat pump going out, the important part is to make sure that there is proper maintenance so that I don't get left out in the hot.
Yeah, it's dangerous. People have pointed out to me to be 100 degrees with 90+% humidity, right?
Yeah, it certainly can be. Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give folks who are considering a new HVAC system, both in terms of equipment and finding a good contractor?
Yeah, I think a lot of, I'm going to speak from a homeowner standpoint right now. So I think word of mouth is a really, people tend to trust their friends and family. So the internet has a lot of information as well. There's Google reviews on everything these days, whether we like it or not. But I think doing your research is really important. I personally didn't think a whole lot about residential HVAC before I joined the industry. And so there were lots of things I didn't know about it. So knowing before you go buy, I think, is one of the biggest, most important pieces of the puzzle, is making sure that you've done your research so you kind of know what they're talking about, so you can speak intelligently and you can share your concerns, like filters. You want to know about filters? You can ask, your contractor. But, those are things that I do as a homeowner, is I am really big on the Google.
Do you think you can trust the Google on HVAC topics?
Of course not. You have to take everything with a grain of salt, and I think that's kind of what I mean by doing your research and talking to people that you trust on top of doing your research. There's lots of HVAC dealers out there. And of course, as we know, some are good and some are, just like anything, there's struggles anywhere. But certainly go informed is the best. Go at it informed is the best advice that I could give in terms of replacing your units.
What about, you said the worst thing is to be left without heat or cool when there's a, severe weather situation. How does one know when it's going to be time to start thinking about a replacement? I mean, you obviously want to do it before it's too late, because then your options are limited, right? You have to buy what they have, and you have to go with the installer who comes out to look at it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, like I mentioned, it's important to maintain your unit just like you would maintain a car. I mean, you change your oil in your car, I hope. So it's the kind of thing with HVAC units as well. You can't just expect zero maintenance over 20 years. And I think that is the best way to prevent issues with HVAC. Of course, you think just like a car, things happen even whenever you do all those maintenance, things. But I think we certainly don't think about our HVAC and how important it is to maintain it until it's a little too late.
Show it. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Cameron. Thank you so much for being on the show. Is there
Thank
anything you want
you.
to ask or tell our listeners before we part company?
Thank you, Patrick. I really appreciate you having me on today. I really enjoyed it. I kind of mentioned this earlier on in the podcast, but the 2023 regulatory changes are definitely something to think about into how it's going to affect your units. Of course, we've gone through efficiency changes in the past. It's not like everyone's going to have to go out and replace their units to meet minimum efficiency, but just something to kind of learn about. Because on top of minimum efficiency changes, there are going to be different ways that we describe SEER. So SEER, as we know it, is going to change as well. It's going to be referred to as CR2. And just kind of read up on that a little bit and learn about it.
Can you briefly tell me what that's about? What's CR2?
Yeah, so CR2 is it's a new testing way to test your units with a different static pressure to kind of simulate how the units are run. So it's just basically a more in tune test method, and so your CR2 number will be around 95% of your SEER number. So you'll see a decrease in your SEER number.
And this is because it's better reflecting real world installations. Is that correct?
Yeah, and there's a lot of information out there to kind of read up on, but yeah, just a more concise testing method. But and then also, as we know, we have a refrigerant change that's most likely going to come in 2025. So just to keep your ears open for that as well. We've been through this before with R22 and things like that, and this will continue as the industry focuses on the importance of the environment. But that's just another thing to think about.
What is the new refrigerant? Do you know the R number and the name of it?
Lots of companies are still doing lots of research and all of that stuff. It's not going to be just one. Personally, we have not announced our refrigerant at this time, but it's just something to keep your eyes and ears open for.
The problem is HCFCs, am I correct, is they are very powerful greenhouse gases, and new refrigerants are meant to be easier on the environment. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we're moving towards a low GWP refrigerant is the goal with this 2025 is what is slated for it to happen. So focusing on the low GWP factor.
We're going to have you back on the show to talk more about this in a couple years, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to.
Well,
but if I could, sorry, Patrick, to cut you off. If I could, just to hopefully draw some engagement with our listeners here today, if I could ask for yourself, but also for your listeners to kind of tell me what the most important thing to you when you think about your HVAC system, especially when you think about replacing it and things like that. What are the important factors for you and your listeners?
Are you asking me now?
Yeah, you can go ahead and answer. If you have an answer.
Well, you know what I'm going to say because we talked about it a lot. I think variable capacity is the way to go. Low speed for longer periods of time. I think, quiet, increased efficiency. I'm sure the equipment, it costs a little more, but it seems really cool. Should I be worried about the increased complexity of this stuff, Cameron?
No, I mean, especially our company has really focused on ease of install and some of those situations and ease of serviceability. So, I wouldn't worry about increased complexity of, install on that or anything. But, we're really excited to be able to help continue to provide high efficiency units at a reasonable cost.
I'm excited about that stuff. I really am. Well, I don't want to tell you how old my furnace is because it would be bad to let that out.
No, it's okay.
Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Cameron Prince for joining us, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Keep craft alive. Happy building. Stay safe, everybody.